Yeah. Well, and honestly, man, I got to talk to you about that because just that's growing up, Nolan was my hero. And I think that was for me as a young kid who was interested in pitching and whatnot. I read the book by Tom House that he and Tom put together and whatnot. Just looking at work ethic, and I think that was the one thing that people talked about so much with him was his work ethic and then just his flawless technique as far as the duration of his career. And from firsthand experience, I mean, how can you speak to that a little bit more?
Well, I'll tell you, the first time I met Nolan, I get a call from the general manager. This is in the off season prior to the 1980 season, and he says, "Hey, we've signed Nolan Ryan, and we're having a reception, and we'd like for you to come meet him." So I'm standing there talking to one of our starting pitchers, Kenny Force, and I'm trying to get. This is 1979. Right? And I've been in the big leagues 2 years, and I'm trying to get our pitchers to lift one time between starts.
Right.
So they pitch every fifth day, so we lift the second day. And the only guy that hasn't bought in is Kenny Force. Right? I mean, he's doing it, but with a lot of duress. And so I'm standing there talking to Kenny, and Nolan walks up, and he says, "You're the strength coach." And I said, "Yep." He said, "Well, I'm going to have a problem with your weightlifting program." And Kenny Force went ear to ear. And Nolan said, "Yep, I can only lift twice between starts."
Oh, wow.
And we became instant friends at that moment. And then it progressed to, he was lifting 5 times between starts, but he lifted 5 times between starts. Clements, was a product of Nolan. He was 5 times between starts. Andy Pettit was 5 times. It's not always 5 times, a maximal type effort.
Sure.
But they're doing something, the 4 days before they pitch, and oftentimes doing something before they go out to the mound, or in Clement's case, after he came out of the game, to get ready for the next start. And Nolan's philosophy was you should never get beat because the other opposition is better prepared than you are. And it doesn't mean whether they get more sleep or they ate better or whatever. He said the only thing that you could control is how you prepare. You can't control the weather, you can't control the opposition, you can't control whether they put the mound together or the umpire had a right strike zone, or sometimes you just can't even control where the ball's going. But you can control how you prepare, and you shouldn't get beat because the other guy's better prepared. And then the second thing, we sat down and we talked about, what made Nolan Ryan stand out from everybody else. And I've had a lot of people say, "Oh man, you really did a lot for Nolan." I said, "Yeah, I really did. He had only 3,500 strikeouts when I met him." So, but Nolan came down to 3 things in his mind, and number 1 was genetics, right? And nobody in his family was an athlete, so he just happened to fall in the right gene pool. Number 2 was work ethic. You shouldn't get beat because somebody's better prepared. And then number 3 was proper mechanics. You can't you can't run a mile with a rock in your shoe, and you can't throw as long as he did and as hard as he did, without good mechanics. Something's going to break down. When he came to Houston in 1980, he and I sat down, and he had thrown over 100,000 pitches, over 90 miles an hour. And now if a guy throws 100 pitches in a game, he's out of the game. Nolan, in his prime of his career with the Angels, he told me a good day for him was 160 pitches a game. A typical game was 180 pitches. And he once threw 255. Right? But the thing about it was that he was doing all this on 3 days rest, and now we can't do it on 4 days rest.
Right.
So he said you just simply can't, you can't repeat that.
Yeah.
And then, Clements learned from Nolan. Nolan learned from Koufax and Seaver. But Clements always said that every year there's some phenom that's coming along, and he's throwing 95 or 98 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. And he said, if it doesn't do you any good to throw 95 or 98 when you're 20 if you can't do it when you're 30. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't do any good to throw it in May if you can't throw it because you're on the disabled list in July or August. And so if you want to throw 95 when you're 30 or 35, you need to start working on it when you're, before you reach 20 or 25. Yeah. You need to work out.
Yeah, well, just that sustainability factor, because like you said, I mean, I think and if memory serves, and you can certainly correct me on this, but Nolan, I mean, he was the first guy who was throwing up into his 40s that hard and that consistent, I mean, at least to my knowledge.
Yeah, I have a friend, Frank Tanana, and he was on that staff with Nolan, and I see Frank from time to time, and Frank said that he threw 95 in 75 and 75 in 95.
Nice. Well, and that's, I mean, as far as, obviously Nolan had a great work ethic and things of that nature with, his strength conditioning program, things like that. As far as, rehabilitation, prehabilitation, what were some, key factors you think may have kind of helped contribute to his success and the success of all the other pitchers you've worked with?
Well, I think one of the successes is that Dr. Jobe came up with the idea of rotator cuff exercises, because prior to Dr. Jobe, nobody was really doing it. Right. We didn't have Tommy John surgeries, and we didn't have other kind of surgeries because when you got hurt, there was nothing that they really did, mm-hmm. and so guys just retired and went to work. But with the salaries being what they are, a guy gets hurt, you want him to improve, and we have guys that if I see a guy says he's going to have Tommy John surgery, I tell him to have John Smoltz surgery, because Tommy John was throwing maybe 80 when he had surgery, and he came back throwing 78, and John Smoltz was throwing 92, and he came back throwing 98. So you
did okay.
Yeah. So I think that's one aspect. The other is that the better shape that you're in, the less stress you're going to have on your body. And if you can work that connection between the lower body, upper body, and going through the core, that's really going to help you. Nolan and Roger Clemens, I mean, they were big believers, in having a strong, stable core from which their arms and legs could work.